Pakistan user community as well. Yeah. Um, Certainly, as I have been transforming from coming down from Dubai, living a different lifestyle, to a lifestyle that I'm trying to live here now, I have attained taste for cycling, you know. And being a cycling enthusiast, I love my road biking as much as I love dynamic 365, right? But before I get to the transformation, right, I think I will spend 1 minute talking about why I actually started with cycling, right, and what I've been able to achieve over the last year or so. So last year, when we went into the lockdown early in April, I was looking for a sport where I don't need a team, I don't need a lot of people to do work with, and you have to maintain social distancing at the same time, right? So as a result of that, I was able to pick up cycling thanks to one of my neighbor, who I call him now my change manager for this transformation that I have been through. So when I started last year in April, I was doing about 15 to 20 kilometers a day. Not I couldn't do more than that, right? But over a period of time, I picked up the pace, and between me and my neighbor, we were doing about 42 kilometers a day. So that was quite a lot of distance that we were carrying, right? But then early this year, I had to take a break because of knee surgery. And then for a couple of months, I didn't do anything. And since June, I've started back again on my cycling journey, and I'm back to about 25, 26 kilometers a day now, right? So what I want to say here is, guys, we are living in unprecedented times. And wherever you guys are, please take care of yourself, pick up something that you like, something that you can acquire. And that's really, really important apart from work. Yeah. So just a key message for you guys. Um, Talking about the digital transformation with D365, I'll cover a few things today. So let me walk you through the agenda for the session today. I'll go through a general understanding of what the transformation is. We'll talk about the trends, what's happening in the world of Microsoft D365, where we see the product is heading to. I'll share some of the learnings, and then we'll talk about, while we're talking about this transformation, who are the people who are important when the companies get into a digital transformation journey, right? And then we'll leave a few minutes towards the end for some Q&A. So first and the foremost, right, I think it's really important for us to understand what is digitization, right? And when we talk about digitization, I think it's about understanding the meaning of it, right? But as you say, Nelson Mandela, who you guys are aware of, he did say that when you talk to a person in the language that he understands, which means the language which is our second language, not our mother tongue, right? Like Hindi and Urdu for some of us, right? That language goes into our head, that understanding goes into our head, right? But if we talk to you in your language, right, that goes into the heart. So unfortunately, I'm just using English today for the session. I should probably have used Hindi or a bit of Urdu that I understand, given the international audience we have here. Now, part of digitization, I think we need to understand what the digitization really is, right? So the first and the foremost, when we talk about the digitization, we're not talking about the companies selling products. We're not talking about companies just selling a new product every now and then, but we're talking about the companies which are actually selling experience, right? You go and buy a particular product from a company, not just because of the company. You take example of Apple, right? You're not just going to buy Apple iPhone. You're going in there to buy the experience that you're getting. Similar to that, when you come to Microsoft, you get that experience of Dynamics in this case, right? So when we talk about digitization, it should not be based on the product launches. It should not be based on a new product. It should be based on the new experience that we're trying to put in front of our customers, right? And hence, our focus has to be on that, and also keeping in mind what the business outcomes we are trying to achieve, and that is prime. You know, what's happening now? and has always been the case, right? Any organization, right, uh, or any program within an organization that is focused towards keeping promises, either internally or externally, right? Um, if we are able to achieve that part of a transformation journey, that is normally catered to as a successful program, right? Where it leads to us is if we are able to do these things, we should be able to consumerize the technology within our organization, right? Which means keep the technology as simple as possible in the simplest form so that the end users of the technology find it easy to adopt. And that's the key around the experience, that's the key around the delivery of that technology that you are bringing in, right? Another important aspect of digitization is if you're able to do all of that, but if you're not able to change the way the organization see the data, right, in their decision making process. So you have to change the way the people used to look for data as a goal to get down to make the right decisions, right? So the goal should move from making the right time information or right time decisions to a real time conceptual relevancy, which means that data should be real time. It should be contextual to the area that you're looking at, and it should be relevant that you are the decision that you're going to make about that. So till you're trying to have those decisions made through data, I think you would have achieved the digitization within your information, right? I'll talk about the future of work in a bit, but one thing that's really, really important is to cultivate a digital DNA within your organization, which means the thought process itself. It shouldn't be one-off project. Digitization or digital transformation is not one project. It doesn't start from one activity and finishes at other. It's a continuous journey, right? And organizations have to continuously start a project, finish a project, start the next one, and finish the next one. Everything has to have a start and end point, but there is not one project that can define as a digital transformation. It's a continuous journey, and that's really, really important for us to understand. Yeah. Um, what are we seeing in the market, right, from a digitization perspective, especially post COVID 19? So, there have been a lot of surveys done in the industry, and I'll walk you through a couple of them. One survey done by IBM that talks about the supply chain organizations. Now, if I put all the things in context that we have just discussed, right, and try to understand how the pandemic has changed the priorities or is changing the priority post COVID 19 for a supply chain or a distribution organization, right? So, what are the companies focusing on? 88% of them are focusing on obtaining operational resilience, right? Which means they want their supply chain, their demand forecasting to be as resilient as possible, right? So that they can actually deliver the services to their customers, right? 83% of the organizations are focusing on the well-being of their workers, right? Or the working environment. If you're a supply chain company, you need to operate a warehouse, you need people to come into the warehouse to pick the goods. You really can't just do that sitting at home like the luxury some of us have got, right? And hence, coming into a work environment, the right well-being and traceability of who's where in the business is really, really important, right? 75% of the companies talk about integrity in their supply chain, which means data flows through from one into another. They need to ensure that whatever data they have, they can actually rely on it, right? People are looking at supply chain visibility. 71% of the organizations are trying to look at visibility, right? Where are their containers in the supply chain at any point in time? They need the EDI with their suppliers, right? They need automation in their business processes, right? And then 65% are looking at improving the operational efficiency, right? Um, and that's where the opportunities for dynamics comes in, right? within those areas. So if you look at COVID-19, it has certainly impacted how the digitalization has been looked by the CXOs in the organizations. That has started changing, and the attitude towards digitalization is it's not something good to have, it's something that's must have because we can actually transform the way the business is done today. Yeah. I'm not going to go through each and every of these opportunities, but you see, Dynamic 365 across the the pandemic priorities, what we call it, um, is a good fit, and that's an area where we see people taking advantage of, right? There's another report from McKinsey which talks about what's happening post COVID in the manufacturing world, right? So most of the manufacturing organizations, I'm talking about the large and the ones which are at the forefront of digitization, have been moving towards Industry 4.0, right? And if you talk about Industry 4.0, it relies on four fundamental ideas around their value chain. The first one is around the connectivity. The second one is around the analytics, right? Third is around the human machine interaction, as in how people interact with the machines. Talk about the RPA, talk about the automation in that area, right? And the last is the advanced engineering, taking um, benefits of areas like 3D printing, right? Introducing renewable energy to run your operations rather than using normal electricity, right? So there are multiple initiatives in those areas and multiple technology adoptions that have been happening in the manufacturing organization, right? And all of these, they create opportunities for the D365 platform as well as for the services. But most of those organizations have been actually relying on the existing tech infrastructure. And I think that's something important for us to note, right? Companies are not looking at replacing their tech infrastructure. They have been using that infrastructure for ages. Infrastructure is costly. They can't just change their infrastructure. And hence, it's really, really important to understand that whatever transformation journeys these companies are going in, they would be going into that transformation journey trying to utilize whatever they have and trying to bring the add-on technologies. They're not looking at what Richard was saying before, rip and replace, right? That's not what organizations are actually looking at. Yeah. So if you see, there are organizations which are at the advanced stage of their capability, right? Who are looking at digitizing the work instructions, right? What does it mean for us in the Dynamics, like using Dynamics guides, right? We can use that. Yes, we have got the solution part of it, right? We can bring in the performance management using IoT devices. We can bring in augmented reality using HoloLens, right? We can retrofit some of the automations for loading in the conveyor belts, either through the automation integrations or through some of the EDI capabilities, right? So if you look at it in overall, there are companies who are at the very basic or no capabilities with regards to the transformation journey. Them at the same time, the organizations which are very advanced stage of their transformation, all of them are looking for opportunities, and that's the opportunity that exists for us in the Dynamics 365 ecosystem. Now, where does Microsoft fit into all this, right? Now, as you know, I mean, the statistics I have is from last year 2020 financials, right? Now, as of last year, Microsoft was a $3 billion Dynamics business, just Dynamics. We're talking about Dynamics 365, right? Uh, I think this year Microsoft announced that they want to be in next 3 years' time, they want to be a $10 billion business. That's where the opportunity for us lies, right? If I look at the organizations, it's 4,500 organizations which have taken up supply chain and finance, right? The overall growth that you see is pretty much 60% coming from cloud for Microsoft. And it's one of the fastest growing SaaS solutions, right? Similar to that, if you look at the Power Platform, 170% year-on-year growth, or um, uh, 75% on actual per user growth, right? MEU growth. So that's where the momentum sits with us. If you try to break that further into C, FinOps, and data platform, and try to look at what and how is Microsoft actually doing, right? So whereas the market is doing about 16% on customer engagement, Microsoft has done about 20% last year, year on year. Whereas market is doing in the finance and operations, or what I call the conventional ERPs, about 19%, right? Microsoft Dynamics 365 has grown at about 40% year on year, right? The data platform, it's all about acquiring new customers. And the great thing is that 49% customers which have come to the data platform, they were the customers which were new to Dynamics 365 environment, right? Similar to that, if you look at the platform services, we talk about the BI, right? 18% is where the market is in terms of the growth, whereas Microsoft BI services, or what you call Power BI, has been growing 65% year on year. Yeah. Um, in terms of the application platform and automation platforms, right? When you talk about IoTs in the automation application platform is in Power Platforms, right? 441% and 1,284% year-on-year growth. These are some very good and very promising numbers to where we sit currently at this stage with Dynamic 365 community, right? And this is where the opportunities for you and us lie, right? Being a Microsoft partner, B being in the industry itself. Um, I'll move on to talking about some learnings that we have in this transformation journey. What we have seen over the years, right? And I'm taking some excerpts from a book called Building a Digital Future by Lippi and Vinny Bensel. I'll just load the page and then talk around it. So if I talk about I spoke about what's happening in the industry. We spoke about what's happening with Microsoft, right? But implementing a D365 project is not, or any kind of a transformation program that you go with D365 as the core, right? It does require a level of planning, right? Um, what Winnie and Lippi mentioned in their recent book is about they break that into three major stages. The first one is about creating a case for change, or creating um, um, internal uh, case which talks about what do companies need to actually go into that change, why do they want to uh, transform their strategy, why they want to look at where they are right now versus where they want to be, right? So creating that case for change is really, really important, right? Which is all about trying to find the funding, trying to talk about where the company is, where the company can get down to, what the to be state for this organization is going to be, and in the end, how we are going to get there. And that's the transformation strategy. So that's a step one, right? Once we have identified um, what and how of it, right? It's about executing, right? That's a step two. When you talk about executing, you need to have a roadmap, and you need to look at your readiness of the organization, and also the gap between your as is state and your to be state, where you want to be, right? And at every stage of the organization, or any level of the program that we talk about, right, we need to understand a level of change management. What is the change management that we need to do? Now, that could differ from one part of the organization to another, right? And that's where the program for overall transformation should not be built based on uh, one part of the organization. Every part of the organization that needs to go into a change program, right, or a transformation program at this stage, need to have a relevant program and need to have relevant principles that will achieve the objectives of the organization, right? Once you start executing, you're ready to execute, right? Then the next stage comes and is about driving that innovation and the improvement, right? Which means you're actually talking about the life cycle. You're talking about measuring your customer experience. Now, this customer experience is not just the external customers, but they're also your internal customers, right? You need to identify what your support model is going to be, right? You need to identify what are you going to do to stabilize the system once you have gone live with it, right? From a dynamic 365 landscape perspective, right? So it's really, really important that at every stage of the life cycle of your transformation, you define those matrices that you need to achieve, right? So you'd be defining a service or a quality matrix just at the when you're defining the case, because that's what you need to achieve, right? You'll talk about your conversion metrics when you talk about digital transformation or execution part of it, right? You'll be talking about your program dashboards like DevOps, those kind of tools, right? And I will touch base on that in a bit, right? When we talk about the execution of the program, and that's really, really important. Yeah. Now, any digital transformation program actually cannot happen without the relevant change management behind the scenes. Yeah. The it's really, really important that we understand that the people are at the center of that change. It's the people who make a transformation program a success or a failure. Now, the change needs to be applied on the organizational level and it needs to be applied on the project level, right? On the organizational level, you're talking about creating a competency that would enable the change within the organization. And this is where that executive sponsorship, right, or a responsive leadership is really, really key and desired for an organization. On a project level, it's more about the tools that you will put in to help the people lead and see the side of change, right? So that you can actually structure the people to get on a journey and for you to achieve a desired outcome, right? And that's the two major levels. Now, when you talk about applying a change management to a digital transformation program, right? The reason you're doing that is you want to increase the probability of the project success. You want to make sure that the people who might be resistant to change, right? You're bringing those people onto the journey, right? You are managing the people who might be worried about the change. You're bringing them into the journey and ensuring that you can minimize the resistance to that change, right? Other important element is you are putting an investment into the program, and as a result of that, there are people-dependent ROI. And what you're trying to do is you want to capture through value performance matrices uh, that dollar number, those dollar values. Yeah. And as a result of that, you are trying to create a competency into the organization because this is not the first transformation program that you go into the organization. This is just the starting of multiple programs that the companies will go over the years, right? And then it's really, really important that when the companies go into a digital transformation program, they really focus on the change management. Yeah. Now, what I was talking about the people, right? One important thing is all about how do we keep people interested, right? How we keep people comfortable and secure enough to remain invested into that change management program. Yeah. Now, Prosi is a UK-based change management organization, right? And it's their model, quite well known. And what to talk about here is the people. When you talk about the change, the first communication or the first rumor, right? Now, rumor is also a type of communication. You need to understand that. So once that information about a change to the organization is out there, the people would not be feeling comfortable enough to go ahead with the change straight away, right? Depending upon you are in a supply chain organization, you are in the management, you are in the support functions, or you are on the at the warehouse level, right? Or if you're in a manufacturing organization, are you at the manufacturing floor, right? How does the change impact you? And this is what the people need to really know, right? Now, if the time between the communication, right, and in terms of managing that change is large, right? As you can see, as it goes further and further, right? Over a period of time, people will come back and they would be much more comfortable. They would understand that their jobs are secure, even though the jobs are changing, right? But there's a period of time where the they would be uncertain and they would be really worried about what's going to happen, right? And at that point in time, they will be dissatisfied and you will start seeing the passive resistance, right? Now, if this is for a situation where someone, those worries and those uncertainties are catered to at the very onset of the program and they come back into the green zone, right? But if this is left um, unanswered, right, uh, and they are not catered to at that point in time, this graph will go certainly or down into the risk or a flight zone where you will see turnover of employees, right? There could be active resistance, or people might be opting out of the program, right? And this is what you see, right? Now a particular project or a particular program that you run part of your digital transformation, right? If it's the same person who's involved in multiple projects, that's another aspect to look at, right? Part of the change management. If you have got the same person involved in multiple things, right, people will behave differently for each of those change opportunities, right? So in this example, one person could be very happy with the project one, right? And they come into the yellow zone much later. But then you could have a particular project where they're actually spending their time being uncertain and even to the degree of being so much worried that they are even thinking about leaving an organization, right? Now, in this scenario, the organizations have to try to minimize the period, right? If you cannot decrease the resistance, you need to minimize the period, because if the time that they spent in that zone is less, it will be much better to get them out back in the green zone compared to leaving them much longer and for longer projects across the transformation journey, right? Now, one thing that I would just like to add here is these are the compounded risks, right? Um, which means that especially when you are in a transformation journey, the organizations have to ensure that the communication is as crisp and they see the senior management involved into that communication, right? And even the senior management has to be part of that change altogether, which means um, trying to understand who are the players that are required to communicate that change, right? Now, a model that can be utilized to identify who your transformation players would be um, is like you create an org chart, but that org chart is to understand who are your change drivers, right? So you need a primary sponsor, and the role of a primary sponsor is the executive for that particular project, right? Not just funding. I'll talk about it in a bit about how a primary sponsor should be involved in the project, right? Then you have secondary sponsors who are like change managers, program management, your stream sponsors. Very important aspect is to identify the impacted groups. So if your transformation program has got the key leaders who are actually impacted because of that transformation program being part of it, you will see it much more easy to handle that change, handle that transformation, right? Now, in this model, a couple of things we need to address. What you should try to do is you try to designate a person who supports the change and designate the person who opposes the change, right, in the org charts, which means either you have A people who are supporting the change Or you might have, let's say, B people somewhere who are actually impact part of the impacted group, but they are opposing the change at the same time, right? Similar to that, we need to understand from a sponsor level, your primary and the sponsors, that who of them have got experience in a prior change management, who are the people with limited experience or people with no experience or skills. Because it becomes the job of a change manager to bring in the relevant training for those sponsors so that they can actually do their job, right? And that's why it's really really important to bring that level of expertise and create the capability model for your senior management teams into the change management program as well. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned about the primary sponsors, right? Now, there's a so part of my uh, what we call is the leadership triangle, right, or the change triangle. Uh, the leadership being at the top, which is the sponsorship, the project management, which is the execution guys on one side, and the change management guys on the other side. The three teams actually work hand in hand to manage, monitor, and communicate the change. Right now, most of the time, the executives they see their role in making the decisions for resourcing, strategy, and timing, right? Which means they're talking about the costs, people that can spend time onto that particular program, and how soon they want it, right? But a lot of senior executives delegate the actual executive actions which are required um, to take on a program like this. Now, we see a lot often that a CEO of an organization becomes a, a sponsor, right? But then people only see the CEO coming once in every quarter, once in every month, just to talk about the program and talk about how the program is tracking, right? But they don't see the person, or in this case, their sponsor, very visible in the decision making process. And this is really, really important that organizations have a active and a visible leader, right, who's actually part of that journey with them, not someone who actually comes once in a while or sends an email to people just talk about the change. So that's really important, right? And the sponsor has to be part of the change management team that actually builds the coalition, which means it creates a positiveness around what the program is going to deliver, right? Those positive change agents. That's important part of it, right? And that's the area where we have executives trying to make a decision, but the actual actions, most of the time, they lack from the executives. And this is an area which every time we see this on the projects, we see it's somebody else who comes in and takes the role of an executive sponsor rather than the actual designated executive who has been given that responsibility. So it's really important for us to know um, the prior experience of executives in managing that change. Then only they can be active and participative. Yeah. Now, last but not the least, because we're talking about Dynamic 365, there are two elements that we spoke about, right? We spoke about the change at the organization level and the change at the project level, right? Now, to have the change at the organization level, I spoke about the project triangle, the change management triangle, where the three teams have to work together, right, and with a common objective. And on the project level, there are tools that we'll be using, right, primarily like Azure DevOps. That has become a standard way of managing any of the D365 projects, right? Use Teams as your collaboration platform, right? Create power apps within the organization that you think you can communicate about the change management that's actually running in. You can do surveys around what people are feeling about the transformation program that's going in the organization, right? SharePoint for repository, right? Look at and you use BI, deploy BI that can run on top of your Azure DevOps, or you can actually run it to measure some key matrices like your service matrices, right? We spoke about before. So it's really important that we understand at the organizational level that these tools needs to be provided to the projects, and most of the companies are adopting it more and more. We see that. I haven't seen in my experience over the last year and a half when any project is being run without Azure DevOps. Right? I think gone are those days. So I think that's pretty much it from my end. I'll probably open for some questions. Yeah. So thanks for coming.